heritage consulting team that has been hired to assist the city with the development of the heritage strategy. So the current project schedule sees this project being completed in the first quarter of next year. We included in the agenda the original schedule, and right now we're working towards the next involvement of the Heritage Commission, which would be a SWOT analysis that's undertaken through a workshop that would involve members of the Heritage Commission. So look for an email on that event in the next couple days. But with that, I'd like to introduce our team. And maybe if you could just start a roundtable introduction of yourselves with Maria. Thank you.
Sure, thank you. Hi, I'm Maria Stambro, the principal planner at CNS Planning Group. And Richard, that's so great. Richard's known me for a long time. The first project the CNS Planning Group did was the Dynamic Downtowns Workbook in partnership with the province and a number of other partners as well, funding partners. And Richard was part of that. We were always named CNS Planning Group. It doesn't stand for Campbell and Stanborough, which is, I'm guessing, what you think. Like, it's just sort of emerged into that, which is fantastic. So CNS Planning Group focuses on helping local governments and organizations create meaningful and inclusive places. And we've worked on a wide range of projects. One of the most recent projects I'll just highlight, I mentioned the Dynamic Downtowns at our beginning. A recent project was looking at a heritage site, a heritage building, and working with the local government and the property owner to figure out how to recognize the heritage of the site when the building itself, the home, had lost a lot of its merit, its value, and the cost for maintaining it or upgrading it was beyond the value to the homeowner and to the local government. So that's a really interesting site in terms of the pressure of development. And I know Colwood is experiencing that right now. You've done an upgrade to your heritage inventory and seen that 40% of your previous heritage inventory buildings no longer exist. So it's a really interesting time to set up this heritage strategy. So that's a little bit about CNS Planning Group. I've been a heritage planner since 2008. One of the first projects I worked on was the City of Kelowna's Heritage Update. And at that time, we were building a relationship with the Westbank First Nation. And I approached them and I asked them if there was anything of significance that they would like on the Heritage Register as an update. And at the time they said, no, we're actually not interested in that. Thank you for the invitation. We have concerns about our heritage sites being vandalized or destroyed if they're made public. So I think that was a real eye-opener for me in terms of the complexity of heritage planning. And I love heritage planning. It's one of the, I always say it's the only cultural artifact other than archaeological sites that has legislative protection. And I think that's fantastic. And I always tell my friends, the cultural planners, you're missing the importance of heritage planning if you miss the significance of that. So that is a little bit about me, a little bit about CNS Planning Group. And next to me is Matt Campbell, maybe the C in CNS Planning.
I just learned that.
And Matt is a junior planner. He recently graduated from SFU's Urban Studies graduate program. And he's been working with me for about a year and a half now on a number of projects, and I'll let Matt do a little bit more of an introduction of himself.
Sure. Hello. I'm here to help Maria with this research, analysis, and admin aspects of the work, and I'm doing a lot of learning and lots of exploring in this field as well. My graduate studies was focused around art spaces in the city of Vancouver. That's sort of my specialty, but I'm continuing to expand. Nice to meet you.
And also part of the team is Gwen Bridge, and Gwen and I worked together in the last year working on an issue of Planning West, which is Planning Institute of BC's quarterly publication. And the focus was on indigenizing planning, and Gwen was the editor of that. And it's a fantastic issue. It's actually the PIBC's most downloaded issue ever. And she has a fantastic article in there about indigenizing planning. And Gwen's expertise is really about creating partnerships and relationships between Indigenous and non-Indigenous governments and communities. And I'll just let you know that if you're interested, I can share that article with you so that you get a little bit more insight into, where Gwen is coming from. And Gwen, I'll let you do more of an introduction of yourself.
Sure, thanks. So that was pretty good. Yeah, so as she mentioned, my name is Gwen Bridge. I've been a consultant for a decade or so after having spent the early part of my career as a scientist, as a hydrologist working in the United States of America with the Apache tribe and the Makah tribe, and then moving back to Canada to run the Okanagan Nation Natural Resource Management Department, subsequently departing there to be a consultant. And as Maria said, just really focusing my whole career on advancing equity and justice and mutuality in relationships between Indigenous people and their partners. A lot of my work recently centers around this concept of ethical space, which is really based on a deeper understanding of each other's worldviews, systems, structures of societies, et cetera, to enable reconciliation, to facilitate reconciliation, which from my perspective will be challenging to do without this more deeper understanding that I've been exploring and sharing, and that I bring to all of my work. I know that's not a whole lot of details, but I'm glad to be here. I'm over in Nelson, and I'm a member of the Satellite Cree Nation, which is actually out of Alberta. And I've lived in Victoria. I got my undergrad from Victoria. So pleased to be here. Thank you.
Nice to meet you, Gwen.
Thank you. And the fourth member of our team is Eileen Finn, who works with Lees and Associates. And I was really honored when Lees and Associates reached out to me and we talked about how we could partner together. Very established consulting firm, fantastic expertise in landscape, architecture, monuments, cemeteries, places of recognition, remembrance, very important planning that they do. And so when this RFP became available, we partnered on it. And Eileen and I did a road trip to Colwood, and we met with Ian and part of the team in Colwood. And that was actually our first in-person meeting. So that was really fantastic. The pandemic is making everything unusual. And yeah, I'll let Eileen do a little bit more of an introduction of herself.
Yeah, thanks, Maria. I'm Eileen Finn. I'm a senior landscape designer and park planner with Lees and Associates. And we reached out to Maria a while ago because we often find ourselves in need of a cultural planner, and we didn't know as many as we wanted to. And it's just been great partnering. I have a fair amount of experience with monument planning and cemetery planning and park planning. I think that the reason why, and some background in cultural landscapes as well, and for me, the through line has been these landscapes that are have this heightened emotional aspect. Memorials often have these emotional aspects. Heritage landscapes have these emotional aspects. And another recent part of our practice and my practice has been working with First Nations and Indigenous organizations, either through consultation or engagement processes, or as consultants directly with the nations. And that's been wonderful in terms of understanding deeper connections to place and to landscape and how to really protect those. So I'm really excited about this project and excited about the ambition of this project and the ambition of the commission. Just really pleased to be here. So thank you.
Nice to meet you, Eileen.
So I just wanted to say that we are really thrilled with this project, with this opportunity. And I just want to highlight a couple things before I finish with the introduction. There are two things that we were really drawn to with your RFP. And the first is in the charter, where you state that by the year 2025, Colwood is widely viewed as a national leader in heritage. And for any consulting team, that is a fantastic opportunity. This is your first heritage strategy. And so it really encourages us to lead to best practices, high level integration of all levels of heritage. It's just a really exciting vision for what you want to do, and we'll explore that more. Ideally, I think the meeting is on November 18th, and we're going to do the SWOT analysis, and we'll talk about what that means to be a leader as well. And the other thing, of course, was the inclusion of Indigenous cultural heritage as part of the RFP, and just the emergence of the importance of that through heritage planning. Richard's mentioning here, I think it's a $30 million fund to look at projects with that. Like it's just so interesting. And as Gwen mentioned, really looking at our foundational worldview and how we view things. And heritage is such an important part of that in terms of how we understand ourselves, our history, our community's history, our place in the world. So those were two things that were just really exciting about this project and are exciting about this project. Yeah, I've done a little bit of the background research, fantastic history and information on your dominant settler history, and lots of opportunity to look at the non-dominant settler history and the Indigenous cultural history with Colwood. And we're going to be working with you ideally, I think, on November 18th. Ian can confirm that. And if you have any questions at this time, please, we're happy to field anything you might want to know or anything you want to comment on.
Well, thank you, Maria. It's nice to meet the team, and certainly a very exciting team, great broad spectrum of skills and abilities and interests. I know that some of the things you've been describing, each of you, will resonate with each of our team members for different reasons. So that's very exciting. Ian, I would like to invite the members to ask questions right now, and any questions of the team about the scope of work or the project schedule that was provided. That's fine, is it? That's expected at this point?
Well, absolutely, Mr. Chair. Thanks for the question. And so I'm sure the commission recalls the draft project charter that was brought forward in the spring, and comment was taken at that time. So that was the basis of our RFP that was concluded with the successful procurement process, awarding the contract to CNS Planning. And so Maria mentioned the potential meeting on the 18th. We're still working internally to make sure that's a viable date. So that would be a workshop that we would engage members of the Heritage Commission in to connect with the Heritage Strategy project team and the primary. So there'll be an email announcement about that in hopefully the next 24 to 48 hours.
Well, not that I'm that important, but you might want to know straight away that I'm actually on annual leave in Ucluelet on the 18th.
Okay.
And I would love to be involved in this, but anyway, so I'd just like to, have you finished, Ian? Can I open the floor for questions now?
Please.
Yeah, so if any members have questions for our consultant team, what they've said or what they provided, what was provided in the meeting agenda, please go ahead. Jeff.
I'm very excited about this project, and congratulations on your success in being awarded it. A question I'd like to pose, and certainly you've probably seen this with other municipalities across North America, is the building that relationship in heritage with Indigenous communities and the settler community. Are there any examples or good practices that you would point to, other municipalities that have essentially got on the right road and are doing good things?
In terms of heritage, actually, Richard might be able to speak to that. There are some examples, but I would say I don't know of any examples that are really working from the ground level like this is in terms of the foundation of a heritage strategy. A lot of communities have a heritage approach, and then they're starting to open up into recognizing more Indigenous cultural heritage. So that's what I would say from my knowledge and experience, and I'm sure Richard can add to that. One of the things I would say is that Gwen has fantastic experience working to developing partnerships through setting up guidelines or principles, that sort of thing, between the Indigenous and settler communities. And that's a really good foundation for moving forward with the work and understanding that that is a process. And I think that will be integral also, which I think is different for you're starting with a heritage strategy and recognizing that this is a development and a process to partnership and shared vision, or recognition of vision. Yeah, so that's what I'll say. Gwen, did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, sure. I think that a lot of municipalities and other governmental levels are really looking at that, what Maria suggested, as a principled approach that guides all of their initiatives in relation to Indigenous relations, and really thinking through how they can work to be a city of reconciliation, for example. So there's many of those examples. When you were asking the question about where those best practices exist, what came to mind was Rotorua, New Zealand. So there may be examples there, and I'm not an expert in either Indigenous heritage planning development or New Zealand, but I was there, and I think that there may be some interesting examples from New Zealand, because they are so much more advanced in some of their reconciliation considerations. So that's just something I would offer there.
Great, thank you.
Any other, thank you for that question, Jeff. Any other questions or comments from members? Ken.
Thank you, Richard. I'd have to ask Maria, how do you propose to engage the local First Nations?
That's wonderful. We are starting the process. We wanted to first meet with the Community Heritage Commission to introduce ourselves at the opening of this process. A letter of introduction from the City of Colwood has been sent to representatives of both the Esquimalt and the Songhees First Nation, with the opportunity for Gwen and myself to introduce ourselves to them and start looking at relationship building. We wanted to better understand your perspective from the Community Heritage Commission, and that how we would frame our introduction to them and our working relationship to them. And I think Ian and I met yesterday, and I think I have a solid understanding about that. We're looking at ways to speak to Colwood's commitment to reconciliation as part of that introduction, because it's important for, again, something Gwen can speak to so well, is that the First Nations understand that there's a real commitment to this process, and that it's going to be foundational and integral to the work that is being done.
In that case, I'd like to ask a question of Ian. Is there any way we could engage as a committee to have a First Nations member on this committee?
Ian, please.
Sure. Through you, Mr. Chair, to Member Johnson's question. Yes, certainly. I have to go back and I'll look at the terms of reference for the Heritage Commission. As you're aware, it's governed by a bylaw that's approved by council. So the commission can certainly consider a recommendation to change that bylaw that would create an automatic default for inviting Indigenous representation. So let me just quickly look at the bylaw, and if I'm given an opportunity to speak to that later in the meeting, I can do so.
Thank you, Ian. Yeah, it'll be interesting to, when we hear more about the detail of the brief, how we address Indigenous cultural heritage, because of course, we as a group, it's not appropriate for us to be managing or administering Indigenous cultural heritage. That's for Indigenous people to do and to provide leadership in. But I think perhaps the way it's framed, to your question, Maria, I think it was, that it's really important that the framing gets at what where Colwood actually does have a role to play with Indigenous cultural heritage, and it's perhaps that shared heritage between Indigenous people and the municipality that needs to be addressed in this strategy. But I wouldn't embark upon this thinking that this is for anyone to think this is a strategy for managing or administering Indigenous cultural heritage. That's not where we're going at all. To your question, Maria, what am I aware of in terms of successful programs like this? The only one that I've come across, and it's by no means a sterling success, is where Prince George, the city of Prince George, has acknowledged a number of the Indigenous cultural values of the Laidley Tene by agreement with that First Nation in their heritage plan. And those values are all to do with the intersections between the settler community and the Indigenous people. It's no oil painting, but it's certainly an area of interest and one of those plans that's of interest. Any other questions for our guests from members, please? Josh, hello.
Yeah, hi, I've got one. I'm kind of curious, and I touched on in the last meeting about, this group can put together a lot of information and give a lot of perspectives on Colwood's heritage. And if we go out to the public through the Let's Talk Colwood, we can probably get a lot more feedback and a lot more information about Colwood's heritage. But there's a lot of people out there who have things that we just wouldn't bring up. And I notice in 2 points, stakeholder interviews as part of the work plan that you guys have put forth. I'm just curious if you have any thoughts towards who those stakeholders might be and how we might go about identifying some really critical people to talk to in this process.
I'll get them. I just saw Ian had a hand up at the same time. I wasn't sure if he wanted to speak, but so the stakeholders would be recommended from the City of Colwood. Definitely, that's where the Community Heritage Commission could have a role to recommend, suggest stakeholders. And as well, we would have kind of our go-to that we think should be included in this. And I think, I'm not sure if in the final proposal there were some recommendations for who we would include as part of the stakeholders. I think we've estimated 20 to 25, which for a small town or a small community like Colwood may seem like a lot or a little, I'm not sure, but we did an engagement with a community of 1,000 people and we had 23 stakeholders. So 20 to 25 seemed reasonable, and we would develop that list again in partnership with Colwood, in partnership with you, and as from our own experience as well. And that is, again, just to highlight, the stakeholders is, again, a very separate process than working with the Songhees, the Esquimalt, and Beecher Bay First Nations.
Does that answer your question, Josh?
Yeah, it does. That's great. It's just, reflecting past concerns. Colwood's it's a community of a lot of imports. There's not a whole bunch of people who have been here for long enough to have a bunch of institutional memory. So anyway, I just think that part's going to be really important.
Yeah, thank you, Josh. I'll come to you in just 1 second, Ian, but just on that engagement idea, I see really interesting Facebook groups. They're not a person, but they're like hundreds of people talking about intangible cultural heritage of Colwood on a Facebook group. Are they one of the stakeholder entities that you will interrogate, or will you look at those Facebook groups as another aspect of your research?
So Facebook groups are great ways to promote different things. So we are going to be doing a survey as part of this, and I'm working with Ian and Sanders in communications to create kind of a community heritage quiz, sort of a way to entice people into the heritage discussion. And in the past, what I have used Facebook for and any sort of social media groups is to promote an online survey or an event or something like that, because it's such a disparate collective group. Generally, it's hard to find one person who you would communicate with to represent all the opinions. And so that's how we would generally connect with them. But again, if there's someone you think who's running a Facebook group, who's the key organizer, who would be a great person to contact, we can definitely communicate with them through Facebook and say, would you like to be part of our stakeholder engagement?
It's more to do with the content of what's gone by in the Facebook group that I'm hoping that you will mine, because those people posting don't realize that they're posting about heritage quite often. They don't define as heritage people, and yet that's the true value of the real people right there on these Facebook groups. So I guess my question isn't so much who will you talk to, it's will you mine the information from these fabulous legacies that these Facebook pages have in them.
I think I think what you're getting at is sort of the challenge with heritage and how people identify as whether they're part of heritage or not part of heritage, or what is heritage. And it does, and it's something that a couple of years ago, as you know, I presented at the BC Heritage Conference about heritage for all and opening up that definition and understanding what that is. And that's part of why we're trying to design this sort of heritage quiz as something exciting so that people get engaged with it, and that we can share that with schools, and school kids can do that and then bring it home. And so that people who might not know, for instance, I'll just use an example because I was surprised by this, but the jockey that rode Seabiscuit actually first started by riding in Colwood. So there's that history to Seabiscuit. Yeah. And so that's something that we can put in a quiz and people go, oh, and there was a racetrack there, and you know, the whole kind of around that. So that would be a way out into that community that doesn't see that they're necessarily part of the heritage discussion.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for our guests from members? Okay, I'll come to you, Ian. I hope the moment hasn't passed.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I just wanted to speak to the previous question about the terms of reference for the commission. So it currently states that there'd be 8 members of large, up to 8 members of large, selected by council from the Colwood community, without reference to representation from other subgroups such as Indigenous communities. So that's certainly something that could be contemplated both through the Heritage Strategy Project as a recommendation of the Commission, or a separate idea that's generated through a motion to the Commission. And secondly, I just wanted to highlight that the project charter that was brought forth to the May 13th meeting for the Heritage Strategy Project highlighted around 10 or so specific key stakeholder groups. And there was some names added to that from the feedback that was taken from the Heritage Commission at that time. So,
thanks, Ian. One more question for Maria and team. As a member, as a active, interested member of this committee, I'm looking forward to an opportunity to write on maps on walls about the heritage values of Colwood. Is there going to be that opportunity for that catharsis where we all finally get to put pen to paper and annotate maps with this amazing brain's trust of information that we have as community members about the Colwood's heritage values?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think there's this whole limbo in pandemic world, right? Do we get together and do this sort of thing? And I know that the Heritage Commission for Colwood has a fantastic resource, and that you have a lot of information. When Ian told me who was on the committee, I was really a little bit intimidated and really happy to hear that. So yeah, I think that's something. There are really 2 phases. There's a first phase that's very preliminary, introductory, and then there's the second phase which dives in a bit deeper. So we can look at where that might happen. It sounds like that would be more of a first phase kind of piece, and that's something I can talk with Ian about. How do we make that happen so that these details can be really recognized? And yeah, I'm a big fan of the maps and where things are and how they've evolved. So yes.
Great, thank you for hearing that. Okay, just keeping an eye on time. Any other members have questions or comments for the guests? Okay, well, I'd like to thank you all for coming to the meeting. You're welcome to stay on and hear the rest, but if you have to go, we understand. Looking forward to working with this dream team.
Thanks so much, and nice to meet you guys.
Thank you. Nice meeting
Thank
everyone.
you so much.
Thanks. Nice to meet you. Okay, let's first see if I can find the agenda. Oh, here it is. Okay, so item 7, new business. 7.1 is Royal Roads Monument. Member Ken Johnson has brought forward a request to repair the monument at the Esquimalt Lagoon. Ken, would you like to speak to this this item that you brought forward?
Yes, thank you, Richard. As noted in the motion to council, this monument was constructed in 1972 and erected with the help of Heritage BC and a number of other participants, including the Thermopylae Club, which were the main sponsors. I had the representatives from the Thermopylae Club out to view the monument, and we discussed the repairs. I had a contractor out to look at the monument, and we got a unfirm budget, I must say, because there are no specs for it, but just as a general budget. But the monument is representative of the historical, and if you will, colonial use of the Royal Roads, and celebrates it. It is in a sad state of repair. The stucco was peeled. The bronze plaque itself is starting to peel away slightly. So, but the concrete structure around it, the anchor, the bollards that are there, they're all pretty secure and look pretty good. So it's just a matter of getting Colwood to, who now owns the monument, to find some funds to repair it. That's really the objective.
Okay, thank you, Ken. So I think so that the committee can discuss this, could you propose the motion? We'll have it seconded and then we can have a discussion and see where we end up.
I think the motion was in the minutes, was it not, Ian?
It was, yeah. Have you got those to hand, Ken?
No, I don't. I can't find them. I'm sorry.
Would anyone care to propose this motion?
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Ian.
if Member Johnson would like to make the motion, I can read it on his behalf.
In that case, I will make the motion. Thank you, Ian.
Sure.
Thank you,
So
Ian.
the motion as provided by Member Johnson and included in the agenda states that the Colwood Heritage Commission recommends council to consider the following: that council directs staff to undertake the restoration of the 1972 Thermopylae Club and BC Tourism Monument erected along the lagoon portion of Ocean Boulevard, honoring Royal Bay and the traditional ship anchoring area on the shores of Colwood.
Thank you, Ian and Ken. Do I have a second for that motion to enable us to discuss it?
I'll second it, sure.
Thank you, Josh. Yeah, and any discussion on the motion that's on the table?
I would just add to, I mean, Ken's given a good description and even included a photo on this thing. I live in the area and I've walked by that place at least twice a week for about 10 years and I've never noticed it. It just sort of fades in. So I like the idea of restoring it, but there's, I think it was our guest, Mark, talking about maybe even making it better. And I wonder if there's an opportunity to make it better. If you look across the street from there, there's all that wonderful wood art that Paul fella just made. Mm-hmm. It's a huge draw. People come by and they're taking photos of it every day. It seems to me that, you know, given this is just across the street from that, there's an opportunity to really kind of do something more interesting than what's there. So I wonder if we could go beyond just restoring it.
Thank you, Josh. And when you say, just to draw this out a little bit, when you say make it better, what are some of the interests you're wanting to bring out there?
Well, it's a monument to ships anchoring. There's, I suppose it's an anchor there. Yeah. I suspect that's not an anchor from an actual ship. It looks like something I could carry around. I don't think that's, you know, if you're a big commercial ship, you're not throwing that down to keep yourself there. Maybe an impressive anchor, something like that. Maybe some sort of model of ships that might have anchored there, something like that.
Thank you, Josh. Any other members want to comment?
That is an actual anchor there, Josh. Speaking to the Thermopylae Club, it's an anchor that they salvaged off a sailing ship, as a matter of fact. The ship wasn't that large, perhaps, but it was a real anchor and has some historical significance because, of course, the Thermopylae Club had access to a lot of the stuff that went to the Maritime Museum.
Thank you, Ken. And I see that, Jeff, you had your hand up.
Yes, I'd just like to think about the project we're just about to engage in with the planning group. And I'm wondering if this is something we should just pause on until we actually have that report. Not to say that this should not be addressed, but I'm just thinking about timing and advancing any kind of project where we're thinking about redoing this area will require us to think about how we're going to reinterpret this particular experience. And I think, obviously we shouldn't be doing that by ourselves. So I'm just wondering if it would be prudent for the commission to delay this until we have a better sense of, there was this discussion around principle-based approach and things like that. So we'd be kind of jumping the gun if we start to take on an action without a plan. So I guess I'd just like us to consider that.
Thank you, Jeff. Any other questions or comments from members? Actually, I think it's Ian, then Councillor Baxter, then Ken. So Ian first, please.
Jenny's in there too. Sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd just like to highlight for the commission the fact that we're actually presenting the first half of the draft waterfront stewardship plan to the Waterfront Coastal Processes Committee tomorrow. So that includes one recommended strategic direction that Colwood will allocate public art allowance in capital budgets for each phase of the implementation of the plan. So there is this other planning project that's affecting this area, that will affect this area of Colwood. And if the commission wants to consider providing advice as to any kind of coordination with this work through the waterfront plan, that's an option that we can look at as well.
Thank you, Ian. Councillor Baxter.
Yeah, I very much support what Jeff said, and I think it ties into what Josh said, and also what Ian's just said. So I think a pause while we coordinate with these other ideas, if you like, would be appropriate.
Thank you. And Ken, you were next, I think.
Thank you. And I certainly agree with Ian, the councillor. The difficulty is the current plan doesn't even recognize that monument's there. It's got lots of suggestions in it, and I've read it carefully, but it seems to ignore the fact that the monument was even erected. So I get concerned that we'll do a lot of planning in Colwood and somebody will come along and bulldoze that down.
Well, I certainly always appreciate your can-do spirit, Ken, and you're the person that's out there on your bike, actually visiting these places and coming up with these ideas. But I do have a certain sympathy for what I've heard some of the members say, which is it's perhaps a little bit cart before the horse. I'm loath to be paralyzed by analysis here, such that we have to go through a massive analytical process before an existing monument is conserved. But I do think this particular monument has so many kind of trigger aspects to it that it would be counterproductive to go ahead with something like this without having that strategic approach. It does. If this was just, the Public Works Department and they were just getting on with the maintenance of Colwood property and they happened to give this a paint up, then, that sounds like good stewardship. But if, by bringing this to this committee, we are compelled to consider the values that are being communicated in this sign, and immediately there are trigger things for me, like this body of water wasn't first used by the Spanish, it was first used by indigenous people. So there's already a trigger point there. And, the Spanish declared that the indigenous people had no souls and therefore the land was terra nullius. which is an embedded offensive message. So there's all sorts of points in this that I think are worthy of further exploration. This may be a real opportunity to interpret old interpretation with new interpretation and explain how values change over time. But I would love that to come out of this comprehensive planning process. So I hope that resonates with members. Any other comments on this? Jenny.
Unmute myself. There we go. I think really I'm ultimately just echoing the points that have already been made, but thinking about it from somebody who frequently walks across the spit and thinking about it from the point of view of Colwood residents who go down there. I do agree with Ken that monument is looking very sad and needs an update or needs refreshing. But I think equally that area is an obvious kind of First Nation, has obvious First Nations heritage, and that's something that I think people want to learn about when they're in those kind of spots. So if you were walking past that area and you saw that sign or that monument refreshed and rejuvenated, it's almost kind of it perpetuates that colonial story that we're trying to balance with equal representation from First Nations stories. So I think I'm saying the same thing that everybody else has said, but I do think that that's a significant thing that we need to consider.
Thank you, Jenny. And of course, the outcome may not be that this plaque is retired, but it may be joined by other plaques or interpretation that draw attention to these dated ideas and changing values over time, and the whole sort of socially constructed nature of the values that we protect in our communities. So I think it's a really, I really like the debate you've stimulated, Ken, and I hope you're satisfied with the discussion. Please, Ken.
Actually, I'll stimulate it even a little bit more. For those who have read the improvement plan for the spit and for along Ocean Boulevard there, you'll notice that it does contain a significant recognition of the First Nations presence. It has that, it has environmental, other cultural aspects to it and various signs. This is and probably would remain the only indication that there was a colonial presence in the area. And there certainly was, there's no question of it. So I think that to ignore it, to even let it deteriorate further, doesn't really serve the total story. There are conflicting stories here, and we have to tell both of them. We can't just concentrate on the one.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Ken. Jenny.
I think I agree with you, Ken. I think the point to be made is the timing of it, that however soon the spit improvement plan actually gets enacted versus when this monument gets refreshed, the optics of how those two stories are being told is what's important.
Thank you, Jenny. Any further comment from members? Okay, so, Jeff.
I'll just, I agree with you with what Jenny's saying, and the whole idea of this is important history is not something that I disagree with. It's very important history. I think it's just about timing. There is, as Josh mentioned, there's a great opportunity here to really open this story up, and to talk about the experience of, you can think about it from maritime navigators who are, making their way into this unknown part of the world, which in itself is an amazing story. But the Spanish colonizers up and down the coast, it was pretty intense and pretty violent. And so I think we have to give some kind of new interpretation to this. It's not, as Richard said, it's not simply just fixing the concrete. So I do think that if we get this principle-based approach, We tie it in with other plans. We have guidance as to how we engage with First Nations in terms of how this interpretation can occur. Otherwise, we're just stepping into a minefield, I think.
Okay, thank you, Jeff. Yes, I asked the Thermopylae Club if they were aware that this discussion was happening, and they said no, but they said that they would be interested in participating and providing some funds, whether it be to repair or update this plaque. So that's there. But we have a motion on the table. Perhaps we should take a vote on that now. I will repeat the motion that the Colwood Heritage Commission recommends that Council consider that Council direct staff to undertake the restoration of the 1972 Thermopylae Club and BC Tourism Monument erected along the lagoon portion of Ocean Boulevard, honouring Royal Bay, the traditional ship anchoring area on the shores of the Colwood. I see, just before we go to the vote, Ian, you have your hand up.
Well, thanks, Mr. Chair, and apologies to interrupt. I just wanted to offer, if the commission would like to make a recommendation to the Waterfront Coastal Process Committee, we could, I could connect. We actually have the chair of the Waterfront Committee here, Councillor Baxter, and at our meeting tomorrow, I could certainly bring forward any comment or recommendation that the commission would like to make with respect to this monument and its place within the in-progress Colwood Waterfront Stewardship Plan.
Thank you, Ian. So I guess the options are you could withdraw your motion, amend the motion, or we could vote on the motion. So I think we'll vote on the motion and then see what happens after that. So all those in favour? I'm seeing Ken and Peter. All those nays, all those against? Seeing Jenny, Jeff, Josh. I've got my hand up, and Councillor Baxter has indicated that he is also against. So the motion fails. Further discussion on this, bearing in mind what Ian has suggested. Councillor Baxter.
I'd like to suggest, to move a different motion, slightly different, that change the reading of the second paragraph to say that Council forward the question of restoration of the monument, etc., to both the Colwood Waterfront Processes Committee and to the Heritage team that we just were introduced to.
Thank you. And to the Heritage team. And just a point of order, which if I can just check with Marcy on this. It's quite fine for Councillor Baxter to propose a motion, is it, Marcy? Or Ian, if Marcy, you're not there at the moment.
Hi, Mr. Chair. I believe so. I can double check the terms of reference, but I believe our council liaison is a voting. Well, I'll double check to be sure. And I'd just like to suggest a tweak to the wording, that the reference to the Heritage team be changed to the Heritage Strategy Project team.
Okay, thank you. So with that minor amendment, Councillor Baxter, I'll read this back. So the motion on the table is that the council forward the question of restoration of the Thermopylae Club monument on the Esquimalt Lagoon to both the Colwood Waterfront Processes Committee and to the Heritage Strategy Project team for further consideration. Does that reflect your motion, Councillor Baxter?
Absolutely.
Thank you. Do I have a second for that motion?
I will second that motion.
Thank you, Ken. Discussion on the motion. Josh.
Well, I just had a question about it. Really, I think the word used for action outside of recommending doing something, but it's the restoration I keep getting hung up on. I don't think that adequately reflects what this group has discussed as being desirous for it. Restoring to me means, patching broken concrete and sandblasting rust away and doing that kind of stuff. I think we want to enhance it, don't we?
Question off. Yes, you're right, Josh. It's kind of embedded in the motion is an outcome which doesn't really speak to the nuance that has come out of our discussion. Councillor Baxter.
Would restoration and improvement fix it, or do we need something more?
Josh?
Well, we're getting there. I mean, I think we talked about two things. One is it's not a super grand monument. It kind of get lost, right? And number two is it doesn't reflect, well, let's say it does reflect a very colonial interpretation of marine use of that area. And we'd like to expand it beyond that. So maybe we need to embed those two factors into what we're proposing as a motion. Make it seem nicer, reflect not just a colonial history of the place.
Okay, thank you. So, Jenny.
Would it be helpful to include in the motion that we are requesting the waterfront team as well as our heritage consultancy team kind of consider all of the elements, include this monument in their considerations for heritage representation on the spit?
And who we would, in this scenario, who are we asking to consider?
Well, Councillor Baxter had suggested that we forward this to the waterfront improvement team as well as our heritage consultancy team. So both of those groups could have considerations about how we incorporate this monument into site interpretation.
Okay, I'm just making some notes here. Jeff, you have a comment?
I don't know how I got that thumb going. I think that's what I was just, I don't know how that happened. Read my mind. No, I think that's good. The word around representation and then interpretation, right? So the chance to revisit its representation and interpretation of this important, moment in history. I think those are the key words. It's about restoration. It's also, as Josh said, it's about interpretation and reconsidering how we're doing that. Great opportunity for that.
Okay, thank you, Jeff. Ken.
I think we have to be very careful here. I'm hearing suggestions that there should be another monument put either on this to interpret differently or to add interpretation or to put in something right next to it saying there's another history here. I agree that we have to interpret the lagoon area in light of the First Nations periods, but I'm firmly against reinterpreting an existing monument. That is false history, and we should not be doing that. We either take it down or restore it.
Thank you, Ken. Or possibly not contrast it with contemporary interpretation as well is another option that I've heard mentioned. Okay, thank you. Any further discussion on this? So we've heard a couple of modification ideas for the motion. So I guess that the process would be, Councillor Baxter, you could withdraw your motion and propose a new one. You've done this more often than we have. What would you suggest? You're muted at the moment, Councillor Baxter.
We're sometimes relatively informal about this, even at council, where we just, as long as the mover and seconder are happy, we accept the changes to the motion, and particularly Jenny's changes at the end. I think if we add those to the previous ideas, I think we get a good result.
Okay, thank you. Well, if that's if everyone's happy with that approach, unless anyone's vehemently opposed to that approach, that seems quite practical. Not hearing any dissent there. We'll try and amend the motion on the hoof then. So what I've got here is that Councillor Ford the question of the Thermopylae Club monument, to consider the incorporation of this monument into site interpretation of the heritage values of the waterfront more generally. That's a bit clunky. Anybody care to help me out here?
Seems like it works, even if it is a bit clunky.
Okay, let me just work it up a bit here. Ford. The committees, Ford. The council refer consideration of the Thermopylae Club monument on the lagoon so that it can be considered in the interpretation of the heritage values of the waterfront more generally. Does that do it?
I think that does it, as we are referring it to another committee or two. So they will have to kind of work out the intent to their satisfaction at any rate.
Mm-hmm. And I guess the minutes of this meeting will convey the concerns and interests of this committee. There'll be the waterfront committee and the heritage strategy project team can see those things from our minutes, right? Is that right, Ian?
Hi, Mr. Chair. The minutes don't generally pick up a lot of the granularity of the discussions. However, the video of the meeting will be available online for, I believe, a period of 4 years. I wonder if I could ask to have the recommendation reread such that I can make sure it's accurately captured.
Marcy, could you help us out here? Or I'm sorry, I forget your name.
Hi, sorry, this is Becky.
Hi, Becky. Did you manage to get that down? Could you read it back to us?
Yeah, let me try here.
Thank you.
That council refer consideration of the
Thermopylae?
yeah, monument on the Esquimalt Lagoon so that it can be considered in the interpretation and the heritage values of the waterfront more generally, to both the Waterfront Coastal Process Committee and to the Heritage Strategy Project team.
Good work. Yes, thank you. Does that sound like the motion we wanted to bring forward? Councillor Baxter, are you happy with that?
Yeah, I'd just like to point out that both Ian and I will be in both. Ian and I will be at the council meeting where this is considered, and so we'll be able to add nuance to it. And we'll both also be at the involved in the coastal processes side, and Ian will no doubt be in frequent contact with the project team. So I'm sure we can make sure that Ken's desires on this are made stronger than the motion can do it justice. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Baxter. And I'm assuming implicit in that is that you will convey the sort of spectrum of concerns expressed by the committee as well.
Yep.
Great, thank you very much. Okay, so any further discussion on the motion? Okay, let's take a vote on that. All those in favour of this motion? So Councillor Baxter, Ken, Jeff, Jenny, Peter, Josh, that's unanimous. Thank you very much. Interesting one. Thanks for bringing that forward, Ken. And let's get back to the agenda. Okay, so the next item of new business is 7.2, Provincial Collections and Research Building, consideration of draft letter to Mayor and Council. So Ian, would you like to introduce this item, or had you intended that Jeff do that?
I'm Mr. Chair. I can certainly get the ball rolling.
Great.
So attached to the agenda is a draft letter that was compiled through the efforts of the subcommittee that was appointed by the Heritage Commission, comprising of Chair Lindsay, Member Bird, and Member Johnson. So this letter.
May I include Jenny Seaman as well?
Thank you.
Right.
So this letter is in response to a request from Council for the Heritage Commission to provide input to the Royal BC Museum in respects to optimizing the collections facility that's now being planned for the Royal Bay Area. So this letter, and I can leave it to you, Mr. Chair, to invite the other members to introduce it further, but it is attached for the Commission's consideration on the agenda.
Okay, thanks very much, Ian. Are you happy to, as the pen on the letter, Jeff, are you happy to speak to take the committee through the letter and what it's trying to achieve?
Okay, sure. So this was a draft piece, and it cobbles together ideas I received from Ken and Jenny and Richard. And so we put this together to bring it to the Commission for your review and any revision you think is necessary. So the intention here is to essentially strengthen our discussions with Royal BC Museum concerning the Provincial Collections and Research Building. So such a great opportunity that this building is coming into Colwood. However, it's not really quite clear exactly how much public access will be in place when they construct this building. So the intention of this letter basically is to acknowledge that it is first and foremost an archive, and that with Jenny's help as an archivist, she's pointing out this notion of the agents of deterioration, which are the things that the construction of the building will try to mitigate as much as possible. So vandalism, water, pests, pollutants, all these kinds of things. Plus, you know, the access to the public is often seen as an agent of deterioration. You can jump in, Jenny, and correct me as I'm going along here. But so that's the force, that's the pushback. It's, as an archive, it's best if there's not access to it. So, but of course, in recent decades, archives are getting constructed so that the public has access, and that it's more of a transparent and wonderful resource that, you know, is accessed by everyone in the general public, not just researchers. So that was the intention of the messaging here. So we ultimately, after walking through each of the different paragraphs, towards the end here, we came up with some specific recommendations that the RBCM identify the practices in archive design that support building a strong community through placemaking. So that the intention there is to have a more robust research occur to support the design of the building, so that there is better community engagement once it's up. Second element is the RBCM engage the residents of Colwood to ensure that there's a collaborative approach and understanding of the role and use of CRB and the environment. So in this one, if you go to the RBCM site, you can email if you have any questions. I think there was an intent that our RBCM was going to hold some kind of public event, but my sense is that's not quite clear. So that's what this recommendation is to focus on, is to ensure that there's a more collaborative approach.
Okay.
So
thank you,
that's
Jeff.
the point of departure for the conversation. We didn't want to make it very specific and micro tactical. We wanted to make it nice and broad. We wanted to have a tone that says this is a great thing. We're very excited about this. Let's try to figure out the best way to make sure that this benefits the community of Colwood. It is a provincial archive, so they're very much onto the virtual side, talking about virtual outreach. But and Ken made a great point about hours of operation. Is it going to be open from 8:30 to 4:30 and closed on weekends? So therefore, the entire access is really limited to Royal Bay residents who are working 5 days a week, and then on weekends it's not there. So those kinds of considerations, the operational considerations, I think will impact the architectural questions up front. So we wanted to make sure that those that got into the mix early on. Does that cover it, Richard?
Yes, thank you, Jeff. So I think perhaps the
Or
next step would be if you could propose your that motion, if you'll be willing to do that, then we can get it seconded and have a discussion.
Okay. So the motion would be requesting that that the Heritage Commission approve the letter, and it would be forwarded to the Royal BC Museum team.
Okay, then there's something slightly different. Staff have provided a draft recommendation in the,
perfect.
Agenda. Sorry, that's what I was.
Where is that?
It's 7.2. If you haven't got them in front of you, would you like me to read it out?
Oh yeah, I've got it here. Yeah.
You got it.
Sure.
Could you
want me to read that out?
Yes, please.
That the Heritage Commission recommends that the council consider that council request through a letter sent to the Royal British Columbia Museum the following: that the RBCM identify the practices in archive design that support building a strong community through placemaking. That the RBCM engage the residents of Colwood to ensure that there's a collaborative approach and understanding of the role and use of CRB and environment.
Great. And the CRB is not defined, I noticed, but we'll have to just maybe write that out in full so this doesn't become too long a motion. And does anyone want to second the motion? Jenny, thank you. And Councillor Baxter. Discussion on the motion that's on the table. Perhaps I'll start. Oh, sorry, Peter, I see your hand up. Please go ahead.
Thanks. No, I just thought it was a great letter. The more I read through it, the more excited and engaged I became with the thought behind it. And then when I saw the pictures and the examples given at the very end, wow, if something like that was to occur in Colwood, that would be pretty amazing. So very, very excited about the thought of that.
Thanks, Peter. Thanks for your support. Any other comments, questions, improvements? Jenny.
It might be nitpicking and overly wordsmithing and something that's not needed at this point, but as I'm looking at it now, a few days after having seen it before, perhaps we ought to be more inclusive about how we describe the building, because the CRB is the collections and research building, but throughout the letter we've referred to it as the archive. But of course there's also the museum collection that's going to be in it too. So it's really museum and archives collection. So perhaps if we can clarify what we're talking about, notwithstanding the excellent paragraph that talks about the importance of protecting the archives. Nicely done, Jeff. Thank you.
Thanks, Jenny. What would you like to call it so as we get most bang for our buck?
Why don't we use the RBCM terminology and just call it the Collections and Research Building, CRB?
Okay, thank you. Ian.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I think it's important if it's the wishes of the commission to specify that this entire letter be sent to the museum. Staff had a hand in helping craft the recommendation that's on the agenda. And I just, upon reflection, I'm looking at it and I want to make sure that it fully captures the intention of the commission, because as written, the letter that would be drafted by staff would simply have those 2 points without the background letter attached. So if the commission would like to have the background letter also attached, we could simply add a third recommendation that the letter dated October 27th, 2021 be provided as background with the 2 points above.
Yeah, thank you, Ian. That was going to be my observation too. Josh.
I'm just wondering, I'm naive about what's going on with this. I know some of us have been involved with RBCM, and obviously Colwood's in discussions with them. Ken sent around a link earlier, and I know something happened with this recently, and it seemed very big, whatever happened recently. I remember reading that they're going to give two losers in the design of this $1 million.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh no.
You put a proposal forward and it sucks, you're going to get $1 million. I'm wondering, are we wading into something where people are light years ahead of us? I read that it's going to have, Rick Hansen's going to come and make sure that people with, mobility challenges are able to get in and out and use this thing. And it's going to be built to LEED standards and all these wonderful things that I was reading about. I don't remember all the specifics, but I just want to make sure that we're adding value to this and we're not just, asking them to do things that they've already got plans and have committed publicly to doing.
Yeah, thank you, Josh. Good point. I saw somebody had a hand up. It was, Councillor Baxter, then Ian.
I just wanted to point out that the $1 million is perfectly normal in this type of bidding process. It will cost the bidders more than $1 million to put together what they need to put together for this type of thing. It's not just a question of bidding an amount of money. They've also got to prepare a design to a certain level. And so I don't think the $1 million is germane. It may seem like an amazing amount of money, but it's actually just a little bit of compensation so that people will actually spend the far more than $1 million it takes to put in a bid. Otherwise, I'm not aware of anything that would say that we shouldn't be doing what this resolution suggests, but Ian may have other views.
Thank you, Councillor. Ian, then Ken.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, so city staff are meeting with representatives of the CRB project, I'd say on a monthly basis to assist with the development planning process. We understand this facility, the budget for this project is in the range of $400 million. So as Councillor Baxter pointed out, the procurement process associated with the design build process would see the type of procurement that they're advancing is quite normal. There is some information on the Royal BC Museum's website about the site and the facility itself. I did ask the project team if we could release the preliminary plans that are supporting the design build process, but they said that it wouldn't be appropriate at this time given the sensitivities around that process. But as soon as we have some plans to release to the commission, I will bring them forward.
Thank you, Ian. Ken.
Thank you very much, Richard. I agree with Josh. They're light years ahead of us. They're doing a lot of planning behind the scenes that we don't see. And they're very skilled at it. They're excellent communicators, Jeffrey. But we can tell from the spring presentation that Jack Lohman did to council. I never saw such a slick sales job in my life. If he had been out, probably right now he's out selling encyclopedias to the general public and succeeding, because that was really very slick.
Well,
And they're going to continue on that path. They're going to be planning what they want, and they're going to achieve their wants. We have very little input in the end. They have the land. They know what they need in terms of facilities. I think that our only input is going to be nodding very wisely at the end and saying, yes, that's exactly what we wanted.
yeah. Well, I just remind us that we're being recorded. We're in the public domain, and maybe when you say slick, we know that Jack Lohman is an excellent speaker and makes compelling arguments. Let's just note that. I think it's an interesting situation, and your point is well made, Josh. I suspect that really council and this advisory committee can only really provide moral suasion to this group. This group can build this thing, and it's the province, right? So it's not fettered by the jurisdiction of a municipality. But I don't think that's a reason not to provide our input. This is a quite a significant brains trust here, and I think this is a good letter that this subcommittee has put together. So, yeah, let's. I think that we can still influence this. These massive tenders are so complicated that there kind of needs to be a chicken in order to get an egg, or an egg to get a chicken. But that doesn't necessarily mean the design can't evolve, especially since this is a design build process. There's going to be all sorts of design happening going forward, even if there is a sort of sketch plan on the table. Josh.
Yeah, I agree with you, Richard, that, if we have something to add, then we should definitely add this. I'm just wondering, specific to the two things that we're recommending council request, do we know if they are or are not already planned? So, we're asking for a grand building. I think this is the first one, right? That placemaking thing. I think that's what that gets at. And we're asking them to engage the residents of Colwood.
Mm-hmm.
And are they not planning to do that? Does anyone know if they have plans to do that or not? I think I'm taking that first one for granted. They're going to have a grand building. It's going to make a place. I can't see, they're not going to spend $400 odd million and make a concrete bunker. Maybe they would, it's government, but it's that second one really that I think if we were adding value, I think it would be that they're engaging with Colwood residents on this. And maybe they don't have plans to do that. Maybe they do, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't want to ask them for something they're already doing.
No, quite. Thank you, Josh. So going back to the observation that Ian made, I'd like to kind of underscore that. So at the moment, there's a really good letter which provides some really pithy ideas that we would like the designers of this building to consider, but then the letter kind of qualifies itself and only proposes to get council to write on those two particular motions. So perhaps what we need to do is ensure, as Ian has suggested, that the letter as a whole is sent to the Royal BC Museum by council, and that we seek specific responses to those detailed calls to action, and maybe even strengthen it further, that we'd like to hear back from the Royal BC Museum or their design team as to how they're addressing these things. Actually, rather than just throwing it out to the heavens and hoping something happens, that we actually seek a report back specifically on the response to this, these interests that the committee's brought forward. Any discussion or comment? Jenny.
I think it's absolutely appropriate that this Heritage Commission voices its interest in what the future CRB will look like. I think we were kind of cobbled together, or not cobbled together, but we were created, the commission was created from a group of local kind of heritage-minded people to help council make decisions. So if not us, then who's going to talk to council to say these are the things that should be important to a heritage-related building in Colwood? So I definitely think that it's our place to make these kind of statements. It doesn't matter that perhaps the RBCM has already considered this. It's important for them to know that Colwood is also considering this, and that this is important to the local community where they are planning on putting their building. So I agree that they should see this letter and see what the Heritage Commission is thinking. I have a quick question. It's possibly a point of order. I don't exactly remember how the subcommittee to do with the CRB was created out of this Heritage Commission, whether that's something formal, whether how often you meet with the RBCM building committee. I just wanted a clarification on what that subcommittee was about.
Yeah, it was formal. It happened very early on in the life of this committee. Ian, do you have any corporate memory you could share?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, so when following the presentation from the Royal BC Museum introducing this project to Colwood Council, I believe it was in I want to say about a year ago, or slightly later in the year, last year, they followed up with a request to the Heritage Commission that the Commission provide input on the potential partnerships and as I said, optimizations for the community with respect to the new facility. That direction was then taken to the Commission, and there was a formal vote on the creation of the subcommittee. And so I don't have the date in front of me, but I can find that if the Commission wishes.
Jenny?
So that confirms then that the list letter is the subcommittee doing exactly what they were mandated to do, which is to represent our opinion on what the CRB should look like.
That's good.
Mr. Chair, just looking at the documents that are on the Royal BC Museum website, there is a engagement strategy document that's marked draft, and it's called the Community Engagement Framework Document. And it has a series of actions and dates. If it'd be helpful, I can confirm with the representatives of the collections facility project whether this draft is representative of what they're planning to do, and then report back to the next commission meeting.
Yes, please Ian. Does that, committee members, does that sound reasonable? Ken, you've got your hand up.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Through the chair, thank you, Ian. That's basically, I was going to refer you to that. The Royal BC Museum has started their engagement strategy. Some of you may recall that we had 3 pop-up sites there last month, early in September, if I remember correctly. I attended 2 of them. They were pretty well attended by the public. The best attendance, of course, was a sunny Saturday down on the lagoon. And they're going to do more of that as much as they can. Hopefully, they will engage more and more of the public as they go on.
Thank you, Ken. So, I mean, I think the most powerful representation is through the Colwood Council's letter. So that's what we want to get right here. You know, using the Councillor Baxter model of doing running repairs on the motion during the meeting, I would propose that we add to the motion conveying the interests of the Heritage Committee as stated above in the above letter. I think otherwise we lose all that brilliant stuff that's actually in the letter. So the motion at the moment, where's it gone? So that council requests through a letter sent to the Royal British Columbia Museum the following, and I would suggest adding a new bullet here, that the RBCM notes the interests of the Heritage Committee stated in the attached letter, and then that gets our letter onto their desk. And then perhaps, and then there's the two existing bullets, that the RBCM identify the practices in archive design that supports building a strong community through placemaking, and that the RBCM engage the residents of Colwood to ensure there's a collaborative approach and understanding of the role and the use of CRB and environs. And then I would propose a final bullet, and this is up for debate, of course, that the RBCM report back to council on its specific responses to these interests stated above. Jeff, you're nodding, so you're happy with that?
Yeah, I take that as a friendly amendment, isn't it? What do you call it?
Any discussion on that? Ken?
Thank you, Richard. Through the chair to Becky, would it be possible to have you share your screen and we could read that proposed motion?
Becky, are you able to do that without everything exploding?
Let me see if I can do that, 'cause I'm just.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm just finishing my typing.
Okay, and perhaps to give you some breathing space for a minute or so before you share your screen, I'll just check in with Ian. These proposed amendments, are there any showstoppers here, or is this something that is supportable, perhaps?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. No, I think that sounds good. It covers off that issue that with respect to covering off the content of the letter going forward. And I also just need to make a correction. My statement about the expected cost, it's actually 224 million, not 400. So.
Okay. What's 176 million between fairness?
We'll probably end up at 400 million.
Yeah, that's probably right. Becky, any luck? On sharing your screen? Ah, here it comes. Thank you. All right, Ken. It's all there. Let's see.
Can we make one typo check there?
Please.
Oh, yes.
It says in archive design that it says that identify the practices in archive design that support. So just take the S off support. Is that right?
Thank you. Any discussion on the motion that Becky's sharing? Okay, I hope I've got everyone on my
That's good. Can you scroll down, Becky?
That's it for that.
That's it.
Last chance before we go to a vote. Oh, Jeff.
Sorry, because I don't know if you want me to speak to any of the concerns that were raised about whether or not this was necessary and why we drafted the letter. Do we need to speak to that?
Josh, did you want to see anything added to effect?
No, not added. Actually, that link that Ian just sent, I took a quick read through it, and it does satisfy the concern I had about, are we asking them to do things that they're planning to anyway? It doesn't actually say anywhere in their engagement plan that they're going to engage residents of Colwood. It says they'll engage the municipality, but it doesn't say anything about the residents. So it does seem we're asking them to do something that they're not otherwise planning to do.
Interesting. I'll go to you, Jenny, and then I wouldn't mind a comment from Councillor Baxter on what Josh has just mentioned. Jenny.
I don't have anything to say. I was just agreeing with what Josh said.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, Councillor Baxter, anything to add?
No, I think it's all going well.
Okay, thank you. All right, so your hand's up again, Jenny, or still up? Okay.
Are you fine if I?
Let's just leave
Stop
it, leave it
sharing.
on, leave it on the for the time being, please, Becky. And because I think I can actually see everyone in your screen share here. So let's take a vote. All those in favour of the motion? Josh, Councillor Baxter, Ken, Jenny, Jeff. Anybody that I can't see? Peter, yes, thank you. You're in favour. So that's unanimous, I think. I'll just double check. Anyone against? Nobody against. So that's carried. That's moved. Thank you. Or carried. You can stop sharing now. Thank you very much, Becky. Okay, back to the agenda. So on behalf of the membership, I'd like to thank Jeff, Ken and Jenny for putting this together and being part of this subgroup. And on to item 8, the next meeting of the Heritage Commission is scheduled for, presumably that's Thursday, 27th of November, it should be.
Hi, Mr. Chair. Yeah, that's obviously a typo. This was actually a special meeting, so there's probably a bit of a hiccup in the timing, but we will be following up with members via email on the next meeting schedule.
Okay, great, thank you. So, and I've already noted that I'm away for that whole week, if that's of any interest. And I often ask for this, and it doesn't seem to make it into our standard agenda, but I would like a placeholder for any other business at this stage. So exercising my powers as the chair, is there any other business? No, well, thank you all for your time. I hope that you're still as interested in the committee at the end as you were at the beginning, Mark.
And very much appreciate your time and your sensitivity to the issues, and the wholesome of the debate was very enlightening, and I'm looking forward to being selected to join you. So I appreciate the opportunity to listen in and get more excited. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for your interest, Mark. We'll keep our fingers crossed for you. And okay, thanks everyone for your time. A motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you, Ken. Second. Thank you, Peter. Meeting's adjourned. Lovely to see you all. Thanks very much for the interesting discussion.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.